Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I wanted to share all the books that I've read in January with you. Foster is very happy to be taking part in this video. She's fluffy and excited. I think it's because I've just woken up and come and got my coffee, so she hasn't had time to come and sit with me yet. So she may just float around. Yeah, I read a lot of books in January. I think it's mostly because I had some time off over Christmas, and Christmas books, New Year. I hardly had any books left at the end of 2020 to carry over, so everything was fresh and new and shiny. February's a little bit less accomplished so far, but work is really busy, so I'm not worried about it. I'm only really reading at the weekends at the minute. So I'm just gonna start. There's only one non-fiction, which is How the Pill Changes Everything by Dr. Sarah E. Hill. I read this because I've been on the pill for probably 11 years, maybe a couple breaks. If you guys don't know, I'm bisexual, and when I have been in relationships with women for longer term, I haven't used the pill. And actually after one of my relationships where I did go off the pill because I didn't need it for the purposes it was being used for, I found out that I had PCOS and that the pill had been regulating me to have any periods at all. So since then, sort of regardless of who I've been with, I've been on the pill, and I've never really come off it since I was 16, apart from little breaks, like never properly come off it. And I thought this was fascinating. It talks about all the different ways in which the pill affects the way we think about things, the way we feel about things. It's very biologically based, which won't suit everyone. There's not an awful lot. In fact, I would say there's pretty much no conversation about what it might mean for intersex people, what it might mean for people with different hormone profiles. So some people who have PCOS, who have really bad PCOS, have really unusual profiles of their hormones. And they didn't really talk about any LGBT relationships, how the dynamics that they kind of look at might work between people of the same sex, and it didn't talk at all about how it's used as HRT. So it's good for a specific thing, but there's a lot it misses. But it was the first book I'd ever heard talking about it, and this is the first time I'd heard a lot of the things here, so I still think it's really valuable. She does acknowledge at some point in it that it could do with having more, like it could do with being broader, but this is like the first step. So I'll be interested to see whether she does decide to do more, because it's her area of expertise and research, so if anyone was, it might be her. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I got a lot from it, and I would recommend it. Next, I read Sphinx by Anna Goretta. This is a really short little book, which is very odd. I really did like this, however, I think I read it too fast. So the heart of this book is about a relationship between two people and the strength of that relationship and how it affects our narrator's life from there on in. The lines of gender and sex are completely blurred. We don't know who anyone is, what their preference is. Whenever there's references to pronouns, they are removed, or references to like clothing type that might give it away potentially are being removed. So it's kind of cleverly trying to draw you away from the provision of these things and let you assume. And I found that quite an interesting reading experience, in that I was projecting different gendered experiences onto the characters at different points throughout the book, so they became gender fluid in my story, in this story, but in my reading of it, which I thought was kind of interesting. And the way I was reading the book in terms of the expectations of the like gender dynamics, in terms of at points I was like, oh okay, it feels more like at the moment this person feels more like a man in my reading of it, and this person feels more like a woman, but how does that affect everything else? And then my bride would be like, no, we've decided they're both women again. But it wasn't me kind of trying to pin them, but it was my brain trying to do that, to sense make about the stereotypes I have. So I really liked that. The reason I say I think I should have read it a bit slower is I didn't get the strength of the relationship through, really. I got that they were important to each other, but I didn't have this undying love, person of your life sense from it. And I don't know whether that's because I read it in literally a day and it then didn't stick with me, or whether that was a weakness of the book, but that the main aim of the kind kind of confusingness of it was achieved. I don't know, that was my experience of it. It was interesting. I'd never heard of it before. If that sounds like fun to you, then definitely pick it up. Next, I read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This book was so hyped, and I definitely fell foul to how hyped it was, which is really disappointing. For some reason, I had thought that this was going to totally blow me away, and I think my experience of the book was lessened just because of the quantity of hype that had been there beforehand. And I think because this was floating around, I can't remember which month this was published, but it felt like it was floating around for a few months toward the end of 2020 before kind of being like really bigged up as one of the best books of the year. I can't see what month it was published in. But yeah, I did like it, I did enjoy it, I read it really fast. It's a big book, I enjoyed it, I liked the characterisation, but it wasn't like a standout book to me. I'd want to read The Mothers, and I feel like I might have a better time with that now that the hype around that has passed. And I think I do struggle a little bit with books that have been like unanimously hyped, because I do let it affect me. I do let it, like, me think it's going to be the book that changes my world, and if it doesn't, because I've set the bar too high, I feel disappointed. So I'm a little mad at myself for having let that affect me so much. But maybe The Mothers, now that's past, I think that was like 2018, maybe I'll go into that and not feel the kind of peer pressure of it's amazing, you have to get to it. But yeah, I liked it. It was kind of like a solid 3.5 star book, and it would be really, I think it would be a really good holiday book. It'd be the kind of thing I'd recommend to my mum, because I think she would really like it and she wouldn't have been affected by the hype. But yeah, slightly disappointed. The next is Godshot by Chelsea Baker. I had no hype around this one, I only just heard about it at the very end of the year. I didn't fall in love with this book. I wanted to. There were a load of like things in here that as I'm going through I'm like, oh, I'll like that. And in practice it just didn't quite tip it off for me. It's essentially a book about cults and climate change. So very briefly, there's a small town which has lost all of its water supplies in a great big drought, and a charismatic man preacher comes to tell them that he can fix the town if they do what he says. And then we sort of run away with this concept. I think, oddly, I would have preferred the concept if it was in the UK. It felt a little bit like extra and Americana, which I suppose it was. And I think I'd felt that some of the characters were a little bit cliched. So even though I really liked the concept, I didn't fall in love with the execution, which I find a little bit sad. But yes, that one's Godshot. Then the next one I did really like, first book of the year I read, was Pew by Catherine Lacey. I read this one because it was on Jen's best book of the years, and this one really stood out to me. It's a really creepy, satisfying little story about a boy or girl or person or child or grown up, a little bit like Sphinx, we're playing a little bit, a smallish human who's found in the pew of a church, and they're taken into the kind of Christian neighbourly homes, who think that once they can pin them down they'll be comfortable with their existence, and Pew does not wish to talk about who they are, where they came from, or why they're here, which unsettles the very odd community in which they have found themselves. It's really short. I read this in a day, and yeah, really did like it. Really, as I said, very tight little story. And then I read The Need by Helen Phillips, which I adored. So I tried in the autumn of last year, and I know things were busy, and I know I didn't try as hard as I could have done, but I was trying to find some stuff that was going to scare me for autumn, and I failed basically. I read a few things that didn't scare me and a few things that I enjoyed but just weren't like, didn't give me any shivers. And I bought this one. I think I bought this one. Maybe I asked for this one. No, I asked for this one for Christmas as like a last ditch effort to try and find one. And I love this book. I won't tell you too much about it other than the main character is a woman who has a lot of duties at home. Her partner travels a lot. She's essentially working as a single mother for a long period of her time, as well as being a paleontologist, essentially paleobotanist, who's undertaking a dig in this location that's been found to be really rich in lots of different plant species, like fossilized plant species, and she finds strange things that shouldn't be in the pit that she's digging in. They begin to follow her home. I really honestly was scared by this book, and that really doesn't happen very often, but I found this specific concept really unsettling. I won't tell you more about it because no spoilers, but the thing that drove the fear was something that I already have as a fear. It's one of my like recurring nightmare things, and it absolutely got to me and I loved it. So yeah, I was really happy that I managed to read this one, and it properly scratched that spooky thing itch that I had all the way through the autumn. Then I read Death in Her Hands by Tessa Moshfegh, and I wanted not to like this, if I'm honest. I think lots of people didn't like it. The more I think about it, the more I like it. It is not a story, okay? So this is the first thing, is I feel like a lot of her other books, there is a narrative and a story, and I feel like if you took this to like a short fiction writing class, they would be like, yeah, you need to do the beginning, middle and end bit. This is more just like a thing, and I feel like a Tessa Moshfegh is just like, here is my thing, and it feels very like satirical in a way of the crime genre and who invests in the crime genre. The fact the story just kind of is quite one note didn't bother me as much, because either I'm silly and drawn in by it, or that's slightly the point. Yeah, and the ending, we won't talk about it too much. The ending, I think it was never there the whole time. That's all I'm gonna say. I think the thing was never there the whole time. It was an odd book. It's not one of my favourites from her, but I did think it was really clever. And whilst I would have probably originally rated it on finishing it about 2 stars, it's like slowly creeping its way up as something that's interesting and a bit different, and that always gets some measure of attention and recognition from me. Then next I read Weather by Jenny Orthel, and I didn't get on with this book. I felt like it really passed me by. I read it and I read it very fast, but I didn't like, so the way it's written is like really tiny little sections, and even from the very beginning of the book, through the first sort of 10 sections I read, I was like, I don't know who these people are, I don't care about them, I don't have any connection to them, and it just kind of continued. I just felt like I was reading, like, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. The best way I can think to describe it is like when you're writing something, like either a piece of fiction or whatever, and you know how sometimes you pull out the bits you like and you put them at the bottom and you're like, maybe I'll come back to this. I kind of felt like I was reading like found poetry from the bits that were left. That feels really rude. I don't know, maybe New Year ruder Sophie, but it had nice little snippets to itself, but I didn't get the sense that it was as intentionally wove together as I would have wanted, and just overall it didn't hit anything in me. It just floated sort of fairly pleasantly over the top. The next book's another one that, not to the same extent, I did enjoy this one more, but I felt more came over me rather than is one that will stick with me, and that is We Wish You Luck by Carolyn Zancan. This is about a group of creative writing MFA students who are all different kinds of people. So there's some people who are like in their depths of their career, they're like accountants or business managers, and this is the one fun thing they do. There's people out of uni who are like, this is my life, I'm going to be a writer, and they're really serious about it. There's loads of publicity people and bookish people who think they're better than everyone else. And then there's just like quiet, retired mums and stuff that are like, I'm just gonna go write something. It felt like it was trying to be a little bit Secret History-esque with like an enigmatic professor, dark relationships between people and that kind of dark academia vibe. I did like that it was set on a campus. I really liked that it had more mature students in it, but it's not the kind of thing that I think I'd look at on my shelves and think, oh, I need to tell people about it. It was more like, yeah, it's good. If you like campus novels, if you like reading about people who like writing, I think you'll like it, and I think it will be enjoyable. It just wasn't, it's not going to be in my books of the year. Next we have Earthlings, and I left this book a while, I didn't know anything about it, but I guessed the end, because everyone was yelling about the end, I guessed the end from about the first 10% of the way through. Like, as soon as it came up as a concept, I was like, yeah, I know what's going to happen right at the end, and it did happen right at the end. I did still really like it, and I think I read an awful lot of books, you can probably tell as I've talked through them, but I read an awful lot of books that were white women in the US, because when I go a bit like off-piste and I just buy stuff, that is what like probably 90% of my reading would be made up of. And I do think her style's really refreshing. I have an awful lot of questions about the author herself. Like, I know that when you write, you aren't necessarily writing the same types of people that you are, but the way that her characters interact with the world makes me think that she must interact with the world in a more interesting way than other people. And I liked, she keeps exploring the kind of otherness and the separateness of her characters, and that continues to intrigue me. I still want to read more about her, more that she's written, but more about her. It is that I kind of feel like there's some real interest there for me about the author and the body of work that they produce. So yeah, that was Earthlings. I guessed it, it's fine, so it wasn't any big shock, but I did like it. Then I read a short story collection, Reality and Other Stories by John Lancashire or Lanchester. I do it all the time, John Lanchester. It was fine, it was pretty good. There was one short story in here which I thought was really good, which I think was called The Kit. Yeah, the second to last story, The Kit, I thought was excellent. The rest of them were fine, but none of the rest of them were like standout amazing. They are short, kind of creepy stories about life today, and horror stories about like modern tech, ghosts and ghoulies and apps and phone calls and texting and all of that sort of stuff. The Kit was a little bit more sci-fi, and it was the only one that attached itself to me in a meaningful way, but I still really like them. I think it would be quite a nice like present for that person who's quite tech phobic in their life, to kind of chuckle at and agree with in a way. But again, it's not one I think will remain with me for a long time, apart from Kit, which was a little bit more like, ooh, when I finished reading that one. Nearly at the end now. So I lied when I said I had only one non-fiction, because this one doesn't sit on my non-fiction shelves, it sits on my coffee table. But I read Black Futures, which is edited by Kimberly Drew and Jenna Wortham, because I'm trying to follow along with Roxane Gay's book club, which means Detransition Baby, which is the February readers up there. I've heard only good things. I was excited from when I saw it like first coming out, and I think I'm early enough that I might not be terribly disappointed by the hype. It's if I wait too long, it's if I read it at the end of the year, everyone else has read it, everyone else has said it's amazing. So we're reading that one soon. But Black Futures is a collection of essays, art, like thought experiments, sculptures, poems, like conversations, so many things. It's gorgeous. It's a really interesting book. It's very multimedia. It's very guide yourself through. And I read it fairly quickly just because I found it quite compelling, like trying to kind of go through each of the different sections and flicking through and seeing what things stuck with me, the things I found most interesting. There was one thing in here that I think I've thought about a few times, which is, I'm trying to see if I can find it for you, but there's awful lot in here. I'll talk about it. If I find the picture, I'll show you the picture. But oh, there it is. So there was this filing cabinet that they make. Here we are, which has got entries for all the things we don't know. So all the data sets that no one's bothered collecting, like the proportion of traded wildlife which is illegally poached, the cause of the June 2015 Black Church fires, how many counterfeit American dollars are in circulation, how many civilians were killed during the Nigerian Civil War. And like the concept of that really, like, I really like it, like a physical object representing absence. It's lovely. It's not quite an art book, it's not quite like a political book, it's not quite an essay collection, but it's something, and it's just something really nice. I'm going to keep it down here. It is meaty and heavy, and I'm hopeful it's going to be something that like Tom might flick through. Tom never reads anything that I recommend at all. He actually doesn't really read physical books, and he kind of only reads from like the same few authors. But he did do, when he did his English stuff at uni, he did his dissertation on black writing and has interest in it as a topic, like blackness, I suppose. And I was really hoping he might like flick through it. So I'm going to keep it down here in the hopes that like it might just over time go into his head that he might enjoy having a look at some of it. I really, really liked it. I bought it without knowing what it was at all, just buying it because it was on the list, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this, this will be fun. Really, really, really recommend it. It was gorgeous and a really different reading experience to a lot of the stuff I normally read. And then I just have 2 books left, the first of which is Hysteria by Jessica Grace. I'd said when I read the blurb of this, it sounded really, really, really me. I did enjoy it. It was very, 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 very explicit, and like Tom always takes the piss at me because every time he looks over he seems to like see some sexualness in the books I read, because actually I do quite like it when the books I read are fairly like down and dirty about life and everything that goes into life. But this one was like slightly on a different level. I would say that the woman in this is very sexually disinhibited. I think that she's mentally ill. And it's a very strange book. Essentially, it's a woman who craves sexuality in place of intimacy, in place of companionship, and she is the daughter of 2 psychotherapists, and she meets a man in a bar who she believes is Sigmund Freud, who she has a like pseudo-sexual interest in anyway, and she tries to come to terms with herself and what she's doing with all these men. I think it didn't land like 100% the way I wanted it to. I wanted something slightly cleaner at the very end to draw the whole thing together, but overall it was a really, really, really good reading experience. I think this might be a debut novel. I think it is, I'm not sure. But either way, I want to read more of what she writes, and I don't actually think I wanted much more from it than what I wanted. I just wanted a little bit of something to like knit together at the end to close that experience off in my head, because I think the visceralness of the writing in the centre sticks more than the closure of the book, and I wanted the closure to stick a little bit more. If I was kind of thinking, I mean it's compared to a Tesha Moshfegh, but if I was thinking about my year of rest and relaxation, that book, without the ending it had, as weird as that ending was, could have felt very similar, that the middle becomes the primary memory rather than the story as a whole. But I really liked Hysteria and would definitely recommend it. And then the last book on my list is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I picked this one up after What Page You On basically just have been raving about it the whole time, and I have some shared tastes with I think both of the hosts, to be fair. Sometimes Alice and I diverge a little bit, so I've definitely picked some stuff up she's recommended, started it and been like, oh, whoa, no, I get why you like it, not for me. And that happens with other people I listen to and watch as well. But the more I heard about this one, the more I was like, you're selling me. And I loved it. I know lots of people have read this one already. It's about a photographer who takes photos of men who I would say aren't traditionally masculine, are fairly vulnerable, fairly manipulatable, vulnerable, naive. Anyway, and she takes their photos nude or semi-clothed, with a reversal of masculinity and femininity in terms of power structures. And she's just a really nasty little woman. I really like reading about nasty women. And yeah, it was just really compelling. I read this one even though my work's been so busy. I was reading it in the evenings, and it's just a glorious book. If you haven't read it yet, I would definitely recommend it. And I could probably see it being on my best books of 2021, even though I've only read 1 month's worth of books. So yeah, that's everything I read in the month of January. Been a long video. I think the first clip I recorded before Tom arrived in a state of undress, so we had to clip that bit out. It's probably half an hour long, so we'll see how long it gets. I reckon it's going to be 20 minutes long, but hopefully it's been enjoyable. February, I actually haven't finished a book yet, and we're now on the 6th of February, so apologies, there might not be so many for Feb, but we'll see. Hopefully you've had a good first reading month. I'm sorry for my absence. As I say, work is really, really busy. I have filmed and this video will be out, so this probably is pointless, but this will be out after the video that I'm going to put up first, which is a week in my life. My editing software crashed midway through, and because I have so little time to film things like that, just stop it. I don't have time to go and research another one, figure out whether or not I can afford it, buy it, sort it, etc. And it meant I just had to pause basically for all of last week. So sorry I've been absent, but yeah, you have a few from me now because I figured out an interim solution, and I'll carry on. Yeah, love you guys lots. Foster's back again, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.